Meditate, manifest, invest in you. Join me on my spiritual journey as I elevate myself and like-minded listeners to a higher level mentally, physically, and spiritually. Thank you for listening. This is Black Hippie Lounge, and I am your host, Chanel.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. You can hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Nice. How's your day?
Busy?
Yeah. I feel you.
How about you?
It was busy. Today is my longer day for work, so like Zoom meetings, but it wasn't too bad. So, all right. I want to kind of talk about, we're going to talk about career and relationship balance, right? Are you ready to dive in, or did you want to? Actually, no. First, introduce yourself and introduce your podcast and just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Chanel, for allowing me to be on your podcast and reaching out to me. I also have a podcast, Beyond Her Grind. You can find me on Spotify and Apple. I've actually found out about Anchor through you, right? I reached out. So. Yeah. Because my partner Marcus Jones was on your podcast last year. And so I was like, oh, I want to do a podcast. So Beyond Her Grind. And basically I focus on getting into the root of what motivates women of color to want more in their careers. So I am a career development professional by trade. So I work as a career coach for women of color. And I also, for my full-time position, I work at Boston University as an assistant director of career education, just a fancy way of saying career counselor. And I work with students and alumni with the career decision-making process. And I do workshops, everything related to mock interviews, salary negotiation, looking over your resume, to how do you manage up to, I've had someone last week talk about a woman who's a geophysicist and the only woman in her field, well, not her field, but in her department. And how do you kind of navigate that? So I really love conversations about that, particularly with women of color. And so the podcast is going to touch on some of that. And then also what I'm hoping for the podcast, because I did do a rebrand, is to have it a little bit more laid back, right? Because I think that a lot of different things impact your career. And I think this conversation that we're having is going to kind of start getting into that.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So what about your Instagram page?
Oh, yes, of course. I need to practice. So you want to follow me at Beyond Her Grind. That is, I think my sister's been helping me with social media. I'm not the best with social media.
It's okay. I'll tag you too, so that people can follow you.
Thank you. I think I was like, do I have a Facebook page? Yeah. I'll be checking with my sister, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Esther Leonard. I do post on LinkedIn as well. But yeah, follow me on Instagram.
Nice. Okay. So let's get into it. So we're going to talk about career and relationship balance, right? So how can we better balance our time with relationships and career? And relationships could be romantic or friendships or, family.
Yeah.
How do you suggest that?
Yeah. I think when I was looking over these questions, the first thing that came to mind was setting boundaries. And so when I say boundaries, sometimes people think that it's scary, but you can set boundaries with yourself, right? Right. Set boundaries with yourself and with others. And so, paying attention, and with your podcast, you touch on a lot of this kind of self-care and intuition, that inner self, right? You got to start feeling when your bandwidth is just too much, right? And so when you're feeling that, you have to figure out what has to give, right? In some cases, it might be too much going on in your career. In some cases, you're letting your relationships sort of get in the way. I noticed that. Let me put my thing on silent so that this doesn't interrupt us. Sorry about that. So I would say, set boundaries. And so, for example, when I say set a boundary, say we're in the middle of a pandemic, and I think for many people, despite what people think or some employers may think, a lot of people actually work a lot more at home. And so what I was going through and hearing my colleagues and hearing other people talk about was like how, after 5, they're still doing their work. And maybe they didn't do that in the past. Some people, may do work all the time, but maybe they used to have a cutoff time and they didn't have that cutoff time. So if you have children, if you have a partner, a husband or a boyfriend or a girlfriend, whoever, and then all of a sudden you're letting your at-home work kind of run into your at-home, relationships because you're already at home, you're going to have to set boundaries with yourself, right?
Right.
Right. Were you going to say something?
No.
Yeah. So that's something to do, like really paying attention to that. And then whether if it is, for me, I know I started doing a little bit of that. I before the pandemic, I was really big on like, it's 5:00. I'm not going to do my typical 9 to 5 after 5. I'm not going to open my laptop. I didn't have my email on my phone. I rarely worked on the weekends. That's like, unless there was like a big event. And then, so what happened though, when the pandemic hit, first thing that happened, I put my email on my phone. So now I'm just plugged in. And so, and that also affected my relationship, right? In a sense where I'm doing some work in the evening whereas I wouldn't have done that in the past, or I'm like keeping an eye out for things on the weekend when I really need to be present with my boyfriend, little right. Things like that. And then I think it also can go the opposite end, right? Like, how do you balance your time in terms of certain relationships can negatively impact your career, right? If someone, particularly if you're in this pandemic, if someone needs a lot of time from you, you have to decide whether if this is like a toxic neediness or if it's a necessary neediness, right? If you have children or some cases someone may need you and it's okay for them to need you. But like finding that balance of that, particularly during this pandemic. I hear stories all the time where like people, I don't know any stats, but like divorces that has happened over this past year because
right.
of the pandemic. I mean, I don't mean to laugh, but like really that's affects. So if you're going through all this at home, then of course it's going to negatively impact your career. So that means that you might need to take quote unquote time off for a vacation, right? People forget you could still take some time off, whether if it's on a weekend. And even though you're like, oh, I'm at home all day, like I don't want to stay at home with the kids, or I'm living with my grandparents or living with so many people. Like if you can afford to take a day or two, away at a hotel or hang out with your friends, your girlfriends, if you haven't had in the time, it is pandemic, social distance or whatever you all kind of create for yourselves. I think that's a way to kind of create balance. I know for me, I feel like I sort of, and I think because I'm in a relationship, and I'm trying to work on this now, is like, I don't want to use the word neglected my relationships with my girlfriends, but it was like, because of this pandemic, it was like, okay, I have my boyfriend here, I'm spending time with him. We're social distancing. So I've been a little bit more intentional with reaching out to my friends, and, or joining them if there's something, now that things are kind of quote unquote getting better, cross fingers. But I was realizing like that really affects me when I'm not hanging out with my friends, and also affects me at work, right? The relationships that you're having affects you at work.
Right. Oh, that makes sense. I forget what you and also like I kind of, when you were saying about like going through divorce and stuff like that, it's like kind of touching on working from home. At least for me, I've noticed that like you have to be very careful about. It's, I don't know, like when we used to work regularly in an office, like whatever goes on at that office, like you can leave, you know, and leave whatever energy is there. But it's like now it's like you're mixing your work with home, you know what I mean, in the same environment. So it's like being careful of that boundary too.
Yep.
Of like you said, making sure you're checking out of work when you're supposed to, and just not, you know, if you had a bad day at work, quote unquote, like not letting that consume your time at home, you know, off work hours, you know. So like you said, keeping that boundary is important. Because it's tough. Like, yeah, I mean, I'm definitely grateful for working from home, but like you said, it has its days too, where it's just like you do need that vacation. Even if you are working from home, it's still, you do kind of end up working overtime or working more because you're like, well, I'm at home, you know. So it's easy to kind of blend that in. So yeah, I like that you said that, like creating boundaries.
Yeah. That was an excellent point you brought too. Like when we typically, I mean, even before the pandemic, to a certain extent, we kind of like bring like, oh, I'm tired of work or whatever. But you're right in a sense that you're at home. So what happens at work is happening at home. Home. Yeah. So setting the boundaries is so important.
Right.
Yeah.
So do you feel like, as far as like career relationship balance, can you have both, or can you only have both if they're both the right thing for you? If that makes any sense. Like, can you only have them both if it's the right career and the right relationship, or is there a way to have one, like have the right career, but maybe you're figuring out that it's not the right relationship, and like how does that play out with each other, if that makes any sense?
Yeah. So are you saying, like, is it possible to be in a point in your life where you have this awesome relationship and you also have an awesome career? Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Yeah.
Do you feel like each
go ahead
depends on the other, if that makes any sense?
Yes and no. So I don't have a straight answer. And I think with life, there really isn't a perfect answer. I think that, yes, it's definitely possible to have a great relationship and a great career, right? And find boundaries. I mean, finding boundaries like between like what we were just saying, not letting things bleed in too much. Unless you have that working relationship. There's a lot of couples who work together, right? And it's healthy. But there also is the case where you can have a bad relationship and you're in a career you don't like, right? We've seen that. It's probably happened to us, you know, during our lifetimes. And I think there could be some times where you just find that person that supports you and even can help you, right? Move into a better place. I hear stories like that all the time where I have a friend or a family member who was like, you know, they couldn't find a job, or they just started feeling depressed, and they met someone, that person really encouraged them, and they decided to go back to school and they helped them study. Like really great stories that really kind of show that, yeah, one part of your life might not be the best, but there's another part that's sort of really good in helping you. You know, I think ultimately it comes to you making your own decisions. I don't want to make people think like, yeah, I got to find some person to help me get a career. But like, there are some people who come into your life that really motivate you, right? And bring a lot of positive energy. And so, yeah, I think that could happen. And then the opposite can happen where you just have an awesome career. And we see this all the time. Like Insecure. I don't know if you watch Insecure.
Yes, I do.
So think about Molly, right? And she's this lawyer. Yes, she has her work issues, but you can say that she has a career. Like she has a successful career. She's a lawyer, but she's had struggles. She struggles with her relationships, right? Right. So like, and that could, into a certain degree, impact her. And then kind of like what you said at the beginning, like she's doing therapy, so she has other issues with relationships, right? Her relationship with Issa, right? Friendships, that really can impact you. I know if I've had friendships that, like, you know, where it works and it really is empowering, and some friendships that are a little bit negative, you know, and like, oh, should I keep this energy in my life, right? And so, or also using Molly again, and like to some of the relationships you have at work, right? Or those other things that can impact your career, in a sense. But yeah, but she's a good example of someone who has a great career. And I think ultimately we want both. right. So yeah, I hope that answers.
That answers. But like I said, you mostly, you know, we do want both, but it's hard to find both sometimes.
It is.
That is a good example, like someone like Molly, who is, you know, her career is great, but she just can't seem to get the relationship part right. So yeah, it happens.
It does happen.
Yeah. So how can people our age balance both while dealing with COVID?
Yeah, that's a good question. So on the career perspective, you know, COVID has impacted the job and economic landscape in so many ways. In some cases, it's been very negative. One of the things that I also do that I mentioned is I work part-time at a nonprofit helping single mothers who are at risk of being homeless. And so for that demographic population, the pandemic has impacted those industries. A lot of them was like hospitality or food industries, and a lot of direct service work that you're in contact with people. And in some cases it was beneficial, right? But like if they're a CNA or doing something in healthcare, they were able to find jobs. But in other cases, right, they lost roles. So it definitely negatively impacted a group of people, and unfortunately the underrepresented, many of the underrepresented minorities. And in some cases it benefited others, like the tech industries, finance industries, those, of course, healthcare industry. And so if you're in those fields, and even to a certain extent education, if you're in those fields, then, you know, COVID may have been quote unquote good for you, right? Not trying to negate all the negative that's happened, but for some people, you hear these stories where they're like, I even hear with certain entrepreneurs, like, you know, social media or Netflix or whatever just skyrocketed. Or if you're a stockbroker, you know, during certain periods of the year, you know, like you really benefited from it. So depending on where you fall, that impacted you. Now, in terms of relationships and careers, like a lot of people meet people at work. That's another way where careers and relationships intersect. And if you started your job remotely, there's so many people who started jobs remotely, and that has been hard for a lot of people because, one, it's hard to build connections. It's hard to really know who else works there. And a lot of times when you start a job and you're working with people, if you meet someone who you have good rapport with, you know, you go out to lunch or you go out for drinks or you go out for that. So that is missing, right, to a certain extent. And I think now, you know, well, particularly last year, they were trying to do a lot more Zoom type events, but people are kind of drained from Zoom. It's like after 4 meetings during the day, you really want me to come at 6 p.m. and do a quote unquote networking Zoom meeting. So that really changed the relationship, the idea of relationships at work, right, between coworkers, and then also those romantic relationships that may have came from meeting people at work, or people who, you know, being introduced by a colleague or whatever it may be. And so on the other end, right, relationships definitely have been impacted. I think particularly close to, you know, at the beginning of this pandemic, when people are probably a little bit more likely not to meet in person. I think people have become comfortable, and more and more people are meeting online, right? I mean, I'm not in I'm in a full, like a relationship, so I didn't have to, experience what that would have been. But I know that could be really hard for someone who's single, and maybe even isolating, and particularly how they feel, and particularly if they are at risk and they don't want to take a chance of like meeting someone in person.
Right.
So, so that's hard. So not only are you like, oh, I can't really date, but like I just started a new job and I can't really talk to anybody, or the relationships aren't as rich, right? Because you're missing that sort of richer social context when you're doing everything online. And but I mean, I think people, those who are open, again, I think everything is about, in your life, is about setting boundaries. What works for you. For some people, they're willing to go on dates, but they just want to do a social distance date. Or I know one of my aunts who, she started off with just like online, do a Facebook, say Facebook, but FaceTime. Yes. FaceTime. So some people are like finding ways to do that. And then some people who are, just comfortable still now, or maybe they get tested, whatever your boundaries are in terms of this landscape that we're living in, set that, make that clear with your prospective partner. And, go, develop those relationships, because we are social beings. That's how relationships are so key. And another thing too, in terms of relationships, the number one way to get a job is through networking. So that's what is networking? People think of like those evening networking events. Networking is just getting to know people, and a few years later you hear about a job because of that other person. You met that person, or you worked with that person. Those are relationships as well, right? And so networking is based on relationship building. So I really recommend that you take advantage of the online tools that we have available, like meetup.com, which is a way to connect with social people, or people in a social way. When I'm from Chicago, when I moved to Boston, one of the things I had to do was build a network. So I had moved here, lived with a roommate in Revere. She's great. I'm actually going to hang out with her this weekend. It's going to be almost 6 years. She's the best. And but I still had to kind of create my own community. Particularly, I lost my job while I was in Boston. So I went to meetup.com, joined a Black professional network, and joined that, went to events through that. They still have events. And now they're virtual. So that's one, it's social and it's also professional. You can also online, like professional association, like if you're a marketer, so the American Marketing Association, that's something that you could probably join. And then of course, LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn is a social media platform, and it's a social media platform made for professionals. So looking on there to connect with alumni that you haven't talked to in a while, whether if it's from undergrad, grad school, or high school, look to see, follow companies you're interested in, right? That's another way. I think with COVID, it definitely elevated the importance of LinkedIn. Like LinkedIn is the spot. And I mean, of course, I'm a career development professional, so I might sound a little nerdy about LinkedIn. But yeah. So that's what I would say, like how to deal with COVID during this time.
Yeah, that's good. That makes sense. So what about you yourself? Do you struggle with balancing your time and energy to fully commit to, you say you work 2 jobs and you're in a relationship, and then making time for yourself? Like, how do you balance that?
It's a work in progress. I'm going to be all honest. I mean, we talked about this past weekend, like you're doing a lot of work, and it's really, another thing I forgot to mention, I'm also in school, getting my MBA. And one of the things I had to do last semester actually was I had 3 classes. I was scheduled to take 3 classes, and I decided to drop 2 of them because I just couldn't. And I was like, okay, I need to have at least one day. And one of the things that I've been intentional about, I'm not perfect at it, but what I've been intentional about is like having a day where I can just chill with my boyfriend, right? And like, I'm a busybody. I'm always a busybody in a sense, like, even if it's like a day, I'm like, just watering my plants or do just, it's hard for me to stay still, but I just still needed a day where, for the most part, like I'm not the biggest like TV watcher, but this is my time to connect with, you know, my boyfriend, and we catch up or whatever. Like, yes, throughout the week as well, but just at least having like a day to do that. And I think that that's important. I also make it intentional throughout the week. Like usually it's Friday nights to like, because I'm here in Boston and most of my family is in Chicago or around the States, like in the South as well. And so I am very intentional in trying to make time to talk to them. I'm from a big family. I'm the oldest of 8 children. And it's hard to, I won't say I talk to each one of them every day because there's so many of us, we can go, we have a group chat, so we are in touch with each other every day. But like in terms of on the phone, that's kind of hard to just always be talking on the phone with 8. That's just my siblings, not including my parents and cousins and best friend. And, you know, like, so I tried to dedicate at least one night out of the week to catch up with a few of them. So like this past Friday, did a Zoom call with the majority of my siblings were on it. You know, making sure that if I'm going to go for a walk to call one of my parents, or that I'm really close to, my best friend who's in Philly, you know, so stuff like that. I think you have to do, like, really be intentional, because before you know it, when you get so busy that like a week goes by, 2 weeks go by, you're like, what? I haven't talked to this person in this long. Like, you know how it gets.
Yeah, time goes fast.
It does. It really goes. You're like, oh my gosh, I still didn't return that phone call. So, and there's still a whole bunch of people that I'm like, I wish I could, you know, talk to more often. But yeah, just like, again, this is where the boundaries, like, people think of boundaries as like being negative. Boundaries is also creating space for the things that's important to you. So yeah, and then also creating a time too. Like, I have my homework time. So last semester, with the way my class was, it was like not as math based. I was able to kind of do my homework throughout the week here and there. But this semester, I'm like, oh, I really need Saturday mornings, because I notice I concentrate better if it's like math based, to focus on that. So Saturday mornings, I'm here in my apartment by myself, working on my homework for marketing, you know, because there's some math stuff involved. So like finding that balance, you know, for that. And I still think I need some more for myself. You know, I started doing a little bit more, like taking baths. I haven't done it recently, but like for a few months, I was like making sure I was taking a bath, and doing things that were very relaxing. This week, I've been doing more, especially since the weather is better. It's like walking. I told myself every day this week I'm walking, and I've been doing so good since Sunday. So little things like that, that's taking time for yourself.
For yourself.
Yeah,
that makes sense. So what advice can you give to someone who, you know, they might be working from home and they maybe want a new career, or they want a relationship? Obviously with COVID, it's a little bit different, you know, going about those things now. How can they make it work, like during COVID? Like, say they're just unhappy with their job and they want to date. Like, what I know you said about like using online apps or something, or virtual dating, but what advice could you give to someone in that type of position? Yeah.
So I think my first piece of advice is like prioritize, in a sense. Like, you can do both, but like think about your situation. Like, are you in a situation where you're like, you're unemployed and you really need a job? You may need to have to focus on your career. You know, not to say that you can't have a relationship or you can't meet someone, or just if someone comes into your life and you just say, no, I'm looking for a job. I'm not trying to say that, but really think about your priorities at the moment, right? And that can kind of direct you into where, what you should do. So if you are going to take that route, like the career route, I would say one of the first things you need to do still, I mean, actually, the advice is kind of similar for both, whether if you're trying to look for someone or look for a job, is like reflect. What do you really want in a career? What do you really want in a partner, right? Write it down, right? What's the vision that you have for yourself? What does that include? Does that include your career? Does that include a partner, right? What is that? Write it down, create a vision board. I have a vision board, and in my vision board, I also have it's like made up of like 4 little boards. And one of the boards is like a relationship board, right? Like has a picture of Marcus on there, and other like quotes and stuff like that. So that's part of my whole, vision. So we're really big with career development, like reflection, self-discovery, what is important to you, because that kind of guides your decisions. Once you kind of start doing that, then you can, hopefully that can guide you to what you want to do, like what types of job you're interested. Do you need to go back to school? And then you can start making moves from there. So if you don't have to go back to school, who are you going to start networking? 80% of jobs come through networking. Do you have the skill set for that career? If you do, network, apply for jobs, take advantage of your alma mater, your past schools. If you went to college, most schools have a career center. You can get your resume reviewed for free. Even though I'm a career coach and I would love to get paid, career coaches are expensive. So, take advantage of free resources through your school. And then, if you do want to work with a coach, definitely do that as well, because it is helpful. And then, after you have your resume, after you've done your network, after you updated your LinkedIn, of course you can do the traditional applying online. And so similar to, that, and this, the same rules basically apply during a pandemic. I mean, there's so many resources on how to interview virtually, right? There's some things you're going to have to learn now, interviewing virtually and creating, salary negotiation, paying attention to social cues. What do you wear? Some people, what we've noticed with some of our mock interviews when we've had employers on campus at Boston University is that some students they're wear regular clothes, whereas in the past, even though it was a mock interview, it was like employers are coming on campus, so they dressed up. But for some reason, maybe because of this pandemic, they're not dressing up, and employers are like, yeah, I know this is a mock interview, but why did they dress up? So little things like that you probably are not paying attention to, make sure you look into that. So doing as much research as possible on the company and the organization and how to sort of navigate the virtual landscape for job search, I think would be helpful. And then so similar, like again, after you do some reflection, similarly to like relationships, if you're thinking about a romantic relationship, after you've done your reflections, take the initiative, like go out there. I'm a big advocate. Everybody stick to your values, but I'm an advocate as a woman to like go for what you want, So, so if, you are interested in doing the online dating, go ahead and do the online dating. If you want to start doing some of the networking and go on and networking, and there's someone that you want to talk to, go ahead, do that. If that's not your style, but put yourself in places, virtual spaces or in-person spaces in which the chances of you being noticed, or at least being a prospect for dating, increases. And so, yeah, that's what I would say. And then again, think back to everything we've been saying, like create boundaries between your life, relationship, and work.
Right. That was good. I like that. That was good advice. Definitely go for it.
Yeah.
I feel like you said, as women, we should just go for what we want. And like you said, kind of create. I feel like this pandemic has also pushed people to be out of their comfort zone too, in certain things, right? Like even if you weren't online dating before, but you are someone who's very cautious about, being out and about, then your options are pretty much limited to online dating. At least trying it. So yeah, I feel like you said, definitely being willing to try something new and like put yourself out there, and whether that be for a relationship or career too, like you said, this is a good time to reflect, whether it be to go over your resume and see like, okay, what can I, tweak, or, what do I need to update or make it more appealing, and take the time to, apply for positions, or figure out, like you said, do research and figure out, what do I need in order to be qualified for this position or something like that. So I think I like what you said about that, and it's like, take advantage of the time that you do have at home too, to kind of make it work for you.
That's another thing, taking that time, taking advantage of that. One thing I forgot to add in terms of creating balance, is one of the things that I do for self-care is meditate. And
oh yeah, me too.
that is so helpful, and I've noticed that when I go through long stretches of not meditating, it really affects my attitude, and I'm a crankier person. And so if that's something that you've never done before, I suggest to do that. It gives a lot of clarity.
Right.
And there are so many ways. There's not one way to meditate. Some people think like, oh, you just stay quiet in a corner or whatever, sitting down. Like, people meditate while they're walking. People meditate in a lot of different ways. But basically it's just taking some time to breathe, honestly. Taking some time to breathe, I think is super helpful. And it can give you clarity. I like that too. Not only with a career, but in relationships as well.
Right. And in life in general, right? Sometimes you just need to take that breath and like be still and like let your thoughts kind of calm down. And, definitely I do that too. For me, it's like with my anxiety, like it definitely helps, because you can kind of get all over the place, and you're trying to multitask all these things, and so just taking that time to just reflect and like give your brain a break.
So true, because looking for a job is a job, and it's very stressful,
right?
Very draining. and online, I used to do online day. I actually met Marcus online, so that could be a little stressful too.
Yeah, tell me about it. Like, my friends, they get on me because I will make a profile, and then like 2 days later I'm like, all right, delete. Like,
I used to do that too. I'm gonna be honest, I used to kind of go stretches. I would go months without going online, and then I'm like, oh, let me just go back on.
Right. But everything happens at the right time. So whether that be with a career or a relationship, like, also I think people should remember that, to give themselves that, give themselves a break, in the sense of like, it's not all going to happen right away. It just takes time. So just keep working at it, being open, until you get what you want. So I feel like you have a lot of information, a lot of good advice to listeners about, the work-life balance, because it is something that I feel like as adults, we are always constantly working, and like it does consume a lot of your life. So still making sure you make that balance for your personal life and the things that you need for you is definitely important. And I like the work that you do. Thank you. That's like needed. I feel like we need more of that, like just because it's hard out here, and people I'm sure people that you work with, they appreciate the advice that you give, and the resources that you can provide, and the help that you provide. So I definitely appreciate that you do that work, and keep at it. And definitely with your podcast, I'm looking forward to being on there and talking to you.
I'm excited about that as well.
Yeah, I'm excited too. So I don't know if you want to have any last like comments you want to give, and shout yourself out again, and any closing remarks.
I thank you again, Chanel. I'm so happy that you reached out to me on Instagram. I was really excited to do this, and I'm really excited about interviewing you as well. I think that this is a really great topic. I know you were giving me praises for what I do. I think what you do is amazing as well, both in, your career as well. And I'll, in my podcast, I'll go into that or learn a little bit more and dive into that, but also with the topics that you have on this podcast, which is like very self-care, kind of inner work. And, you know, of course, in relation to relationships and other things, but I think that's really important, particularly in our community.
Right.
So, yeah, I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you want to shout out your?
Yes, I need to make a habit of doing that.
Yes.
Promote at Beyond Her Grind. So you can find me. Please subscribe on Spotify, Apple, Google. I'm on a lot of different platforms, and podcast platforms. And, you know, hopefully enjoy. If you like, leave a review. And that's
follow her on Instagram.
Connect with me on LinkedIn.
Also,
I'm happy.
Yes, LinkedIn. And yeah, like, you know, if they need your services too, you know.
Yes, you can connect with me on Instagram. I have a basically like a link tree, and you can email me through that, like hi@beyondhergrind.com, if that's something you're interested. If you're interested in career coaching or some career advice.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you, Esther, for coming on the podcast. Definitely appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to being on your podcast soon.
I'm looking forward to it as well. So would next Wednesday work for you?
Yes, that's fine for me.
Okay.
I think so. Yeah, let me check my schedule. But
okay, I'll probably, similar to you, like in a few days, I'll send you some questions and also confirm the date.
Okay.
Yeah, and I guess I'll probably see you on Friday. Are you gonna make it?
I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, I probably will be.
Okay. Well.
Yeah, I'll probably be there.
Well, either way, I'll see you soon. Or talk to you soon.
Right.
All right. Have a good one.